So I'm so glad to have you on the show. Welcome to Filmmaking Talkcast. Thank you for
Yeah, of
taking the time to be here. I
course.
appreciate you
Thank
so
you. Of
much.
course.
For me, it's a privilege because when Mitch mentioned you and I started looking at your Instagram, I started seeing all kinds of work on there that I could see you did music videos, you've done commercials, you've done documentaries, you've gone to film festival and won in film festivals. And you even done your like own workshops. It looked like to teach others, or seen
Mhm.
something on there on your Instagram about workshops.
Yep.
So it just seems that you have a very diverse background, very experienced. And as soon as I seen that, I'm like, wow, this person has so much to offer to the show. So I hope he wants to be on here as well. And when Mitch said you were up for it, I was like, awesome. So
Yeah.
thanks again.
Yeah. I'm glad
Um,
Mitch connected us. This is
yeah.
great.
So how do you know Mitch, if you don't mind me asking?
So Mitch and I met. He was involved with a storytelling event called True Story.
Okay.
That's had a couple iterations, and he is involved with that. And I came in June of last year and became very involved in that and sort of co-host it now. And he still shows up and tells stories once in a
Wow,
while.
that is
So
awesome. That is so
he's great.
awesome.
Yeah, he's got great
Cool.
stories.
Cool. So yesterday from talking on the phone, I mentioned that this I was going to try to keep everything within 30 minutes,
Mhm.
and you made a good point. You're like, wow, there's only so much I can cover from your lifespan in 30 minutes,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm sure the viewers understand that. So I just want to go over some highlights, and I would like to try to take it to the beginning of what gravitated you to film.
That's a really good question. I was always a lover of cinema, like most people, but it really didn't become sort of universal in my life until I went to work for National Geographic after college. And I worked in South America for years and years and years. And I was sort of mainly based on the west coast of Ecuador and Peru and Chile, but was traveling all over South America for different articles. And as I
Wow.
traveled around, we were on the magazine side. And so we were setting up as sort of line producers for the magazine. There's stories about snakes and frogs and wild horses and things like that. And the TV guys would come down once in a while and join up with our crews of writers and photographers.
Okay.
And they just seemed like the cooler guys. And I wanted to
Right.
be part of the TV crew. And they seemed to pick up all the women at the bars. And
So you were
and so
inspired
I
by the
hung out with
crew.
them for
Right.
a little bit. And
Right.
at this point, this was about 2002,
So what you were going to
2003.
college for was nothing related to filmmaking. This
No, I
just
was a
actually,
linguistics major.
oh
Yeah, so I was
wow,
studying just languages and primarily Spanish.
interesting.
And this was right after 9/11 happened in 2001. I graduated in 2002.
Okay.
And a few months after 9/11 happened, I was graduating. And as a linguistics major,
Uh-huh.
uh, I was approached by the State Department to come learn Arabic, which I had never
Wow.
learned anything about Arabic, but
Right.
because we were going 100% into the war on terrorism,
Okay.
they needed a lot of translators. And so I went to Washington, D.C. to become a translator. And a friend of mine said, there's a Nat Geo office down the street. Why don't you go talk with them? And I was like, oh, yeah, right. Like and he happened to know someone there. And so I ended up going to work for them. I lived in the Galapagos Islands and initially and was working
I think it's
there.
interesting that you're linguistic because I like to think of filmmaking as a language. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, do you feel the same way? Is it a language that you
Yeah,
communicate yourself?
absolutely.
Right.
I mean, absolutely. There is definitely a language that you speak not only on set when talking with others and making it, but
Right.
also the visual language of the film for sure.
Right.
I think that
Right.
that's something that you really become, I've been doing this now for over 25 years and to
Wow.
tell you the truth, it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that I feel like I've sort of quote unquote found my voice as a filmmaker.
Awesome.
They say, if you really apply to some of the big film festivals like Sundance or Tribeca, one of the big things they say is we're trying to find new voices.
Right.
And for a
Right.
long time, I didn't really know what that meant. I thought, it meant something just kind of, that you do something that no one's ever seen before. And if you
Right.
aim for that as a filmmaker, you'll always fall flat. And what I didn't really realize until 20 some odd years later after doing this was that to find my voice, it was really about becoming more authentic, about talking about the things that I wanted to talk about. It was really about finding those subjects that I could sort of talk about for hours and hours and hours, and
Right.
then let that sort of, influence my filmmaking.
Right. Right.
So there were certain thematic themes, that I really found fascinating. I would do all of these short films or feature films or documentaries, and thematically, there were a lot of things that I kept coming back to naturally, and I didn't even notice that. There were
Right.
things, power struggles between two people, jealousy, there was love, revenge. These are some of the thematic things that maybe are not so pretty, but I
Right.
loved that I was just kind of drawn to, and I could make films about them and write scripts about them quickly and with passion. And it was something that I was informed of, by as well. And, that I've had, you got to live some life as well, I think, to be a filmmaker. There are
That's what I wanted
some
to ask you.
flashes,
Yeah.
definitely flash in the pan young filmmakers that come out there and do some great work.
Right.
But, to have the longevity of a Spielberg and Scorsese and these, you have to be informed by wisdom and by
Right.
life, and you have to
Right.
live through stuff. And so, uh, it's really been a combination of all these things to find what's my voice. And,
Yes.
what's interesting is now when you apply to Sundance or Tribeca, you don't get that comment anymore. Whether or not they accept it or not is a different story. But,
Right.
in terms of having a unique voice, my filmmaking definitely has a unique voice now.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so this was really just became out of doing it years and years and years. I was, it was Nat Geo really gave me the storytelling background. Then working around that time, 2000, 2003, the internet was still a thing.
Right.
And, there was Web 2.0, and they needed video content as like the first video content that they could put up, Java scripting and stuff. And so they sent me down a camera, and they said,
Do
would
you
you shoot
remember?
some
Do
stuff?
you remember
Because
the
you're kind of the
camera?
first person on set.
Do you remember the
What's
camera?
that?
I know. Do you remember the camera? I know it's quite a way
Yeah,
back.
Sony PD-150.
Oh
Yeah, it had a little
wow!
tape, it had a little
Yeah,
tape in it. Yep.
I had
And I was using
my
the
first
first
camera was a
iteration.
Sony PD 170. So
Yeah,
right
yeah,
there,
yeah.
yeah. So oh wow,
Right at
that's
the
so
same
cool.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Hmm.
was using the first iteration of Premiere Pro. And uh,
Awesome. Awesome.
yeah, this was, it was really the beginning of digital filmmaking. And
Right. Premiere Pro,
um,
like back then when it was not considered like an industry standard, and then
sure.
just
Yeah,
things
no,
just
no.
changed. Yeah,
Yeah, no, Avid was the industry standard for just, if you were
correct.
going into digital editing, that was the industry standard. And it's
Right.
still used a lot, but Premiere was really kind of new then
Yeah,
and
like if you were going into
accessible.
a major studio, Avid, like you said, and then if you were working like in a smaller production, then some of them might have Final Cut Pro. But if you're going to
Yeah,
California, definitely Avid.
yeah,
So yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
super
yeah.
cool. Hmm.
Yeah, so this was a time when it was just sort of the forefront. I was figuring out stuff, it was still, you had to connect the camera to the computer and press capture and play back the video at the same time,
When things were a lot
and
harder.
yeah, it wasn't downloading, it was actually recording off the camera onto the computer.
Editing back
And
then took required so
yeah,
much patience, so much patience.
yeah. And so that was the time. And so before I knew it, in that first year of having a camera,
Hmm.
I had done over, maybe 130 short documentaries within 1 year. I mean, I was pumping them
Wow.
out, two,
Wow.
three a week,
And what type
sometimes
of
five a week.
documentaries were you doing? What was
They were
gravitating you the
all about
most?
animals.
Okay. Okay.
They were
Hmm.
really all like nature based. But this is really before nature, they didn't have like Mother Earth like on Netflix now,
Hmm.
um,
Is there
there
one
certainly were.
particular is there one particular documentary, one particular animal that really
Yeah.
like you loved the most capturing that you felt like you could
Oh
really
man, that's a good
express a
question.
story, from?
I've never been asked that before. I don't know. Um, there was certainly well, there's been the dangerous ones
Right.
that are fun for reasons, and then there are the ones that are fun for other reasons. Certainly being in the Galapagos, there were a lot of great stories there.
Okay.
But I think one of my favorite to shoot ever was we shot in Patagonia in southern Argentina. We shot a group of wild horses
Huh.
um, over the course of about a month, and we followed them. And this is before,
That had to be some
nature
beautiful
documentaries. Rich,
cinematography, just
Rich,
the scenery and the horses and
yeah,
all that. That had to be gorgeous, I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And David Attenborough was still, around and doing his thing, but there was really no, like Planet Earth, like there is on. So we were kind of figuring it out ourselves at that time. Like, how do you track an animal,
Yeah.
and follow them, and especially, overnight.
Right.
How do you live with an animal and you film them, and how do you, anticipate an animal and what they're doing prior to, and actually that's informed a lot of like actors as well,
Really.
not to compare actors to animals, but
It's like
uh
comparing children's to pets, but but
yeah, I
there's
mean,
some
there's definitely
correlation, I'm
been
sure.
some times where there have been some wild animals on my set and
Right,
they have
right.
names. So it's really been a learning process, but I really
So do you
am
feel like there's
thankful
some
for.
psychology that you were able to take from
Yeah.
understanding animals that kind of crosses over to human nature?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well,
that's
like I
awesome.
said, the anticipating what an animal is going to do
Hmm.
is really what a director should be doing with their actors as well. And
Gotcha.
if it depends on the type of filmmaking you're making. I made a film called Love and Youth a few years back. It was one of my first feature. It was my first feature narrative film.
Okay. Which was about?
Although I made some really longer short films as well.
Okay.
But
What was Love
this was
Love and Youth about? Can you give me a quick summary
so
of
Love and Youth was the story of two freshman kids at college who uh, a girl is obsessed with this guy and he
okay.
wants nothing to do with her. So she's going to make him jealous to try to bring him in. And by making him jealous, what
Right.
she doesn't know is that he already liked her. And so by making him jealous, he's now going to try to make her jealous. And that
Wow.
makes her more jealous. And so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
becomes this
It's yeah,
snowball effect of the entire movie is just these two people making each other jealous by doing different things,
like a dog
not knowing
chasing
that
its
they
tail,
don't
just
need to
going
be
around
doing
and
any of
around.
this.
Yeah, that is so
And they do it
crazy.
to the point where they kind of lose control of the love that they first have. And it's called Love and Youth because it's really, that idea of naive love, of,
Right, right,
playing games and
right,
thinking that that's going to get you ahead somehow. And in the end,
right.
it never does.
So not to be a
Um,
movie spoiler, you don't have to
and
share
here
the
we are on
ending.
Valentine's Day. So there's your
Yeah,
free Valentine's
that's
wisdom.
that's true. That's true. I wanted to ask you, so does boy get the girl at the end, or you have to watch the
You
movie to
have to
find
see
out? Yeah, there you
it.
go. Awesome, awesome.
No, it's really, and it's really not about that. At least halfway, you get halfway through, and you don't really even care about there's
It's
some
just the
things that are
games
sort
and
of
the
set
plot
into
twists,
place.
right?
Yeah, there are things that are set into motion that sort of becomes the backdrop for what else is happening.
Wow, awesome.
Um, but doing that, so we were talking about like what I took from animals.
Yes.
Anticipating actors can be very important for directors, especially if you're shooting stuff in a sort of cinema verite style, meaning that you're letting the actors kind of do their thing in a room, and
Okay.
you want as natural performances as possible. So you're going to kind of set up out of the way and
Wow.
film them almost as if it was a documentary. And that's what I
Gotcha.
did in that case. Is these actors had their lines memorized, they knew their blocking, they were in a cafe or in a dorm room, and I would sort of say go for it, and I let them improv
Right.
a lot. And I sort of set up with two cameras, one shooting her, one shooting him, for about 80% of the time of this
Continuity.
movie, and so it was really capturing them. And I was one of the camera operators, as well
Gotcha.
as my friend, and it's really about anticipating what they're going to do.
Right.
When are they going to stand up? When are they going to do this? And that really comes from sort of animals, is
Right.
thinking ahead like that, and thinking about, okay, if this animal starts in a full gallop, how am I
Right.
prepared to do that? Or if the animal does this or doesn't, or knowing how to capture things on the fly.
Right.
And because I not only make narrative films, but I make documentaries as well.
Yeah.
I made a documentary called The Little Firemen, which is on Amazon right now.
Okay.
And in that film, we followed a group of orphan boys who live 16,000 feet up in the Andes Mountains, and they save lives on go-karts.
Right.
They live in an active narco-terrorist zone. And so we went down there, and over the course of 5 years, I sort of embedded myself in this kind of war zone in Peru with these narco terrorists and filmed these young boys surviving.
Yeah.
And that was a it was an extremely not only dangerous film to make, but an educating film because it really taught me so much about documentary filmmaking, and a lot of that was kind of being aware of dangerous situations
Right.
and
I think
knowing how to escape, but also how to capture what
I,
you
f-
need and then get out of there.
I just want to throw in there really quick is like what you just shared, your whole perspective on how you go about directing. I think that can be inspirational to many people who have been doing documentary for most of their life, and even though they understand the concept of storytelling, if
Mhm.
they have a fear of dealing with talent and being able
Right.
to navigate them into delivering the performance that they want to help tell the story, your strategy is an awesome way to go about it, and hopefully be like encouraging and motivating them to maybe there's a whole different way of directing rather than trying to
Yeah.
force a performance,
Mhm.
building a trust relationship with the talent, and just knowing
Yeah.
when it's there, and how to capture it, and like you said, anticipate it. That's amazing. That's a whole nother different approach that I'm glad you
Yeah,
shared.
and you know what's really hard about that approach too is trusting. You know,
Yeah.
not only trusting yourself, but trusting the actors. And in that case, in Love and Youth, I was using non-actors. I was using
Oh
actual high school
wow.
kids that
Wow.
I'd cast that sort of embodied these two characters. And so I thought, okay, they're
And
kind of already halfway there.
they still
And
delivered an
oh
amazing
yeah, I mean
performance.
their performances in there are fantastic,
Awesome.
and
Do you
they went
remember
up
their names?
to
Those two actors. Do you remember their
yeah,
names?
Heather Jordan and Ricardo Montero.
Well, shout out to
Those are
them. That's awesome.
yeah. And what's crazy about that, I'll just give a quick snippet. They sort of
Okay.
play Ricardo plays a sort of bad boy, real dick, kind of high school kid.
Yeah.
Uh, and Heather plays this very sweet, naive, quiet, shy girl. And in real life, Heather was the head of the cheerleading team at her high school, and she was a mean girl.
Uh
And
huh.
Ricardo was a very quiet um, uh, band kid who played clarinet and didn't really talk much. He wrote
Very
poetry.
opposite from
Then
each other.
by making the film, we made this film over 8 months.
Right.
All the call sheets were at 2:30, started at 2:30 because they were in school every day or had
Right.
extracurricular activities. So it was very difficult to shoot the film over 8 months, especially, and sort of we shot stuff out of order. So
Right.
we shot one sequence, one scene in January, and the end of that scene like in August of that same year, and we had to go back and look at the footage and be like, okay, you were here, and she cut her hair a couple times, and all this
Right.
stuff that you have to do with filmmaking. But what was really great about that is that they started as these two people, and by the end of the film, they had crossed paths, and Heather had become sort of like her character in the film. She'd become very quiet and very thoughtful, and
Wow.
Ricardo had sort of become more brash and out there and
Right.
extrovert. It was pretty wild to see that
So they
happen.
truly
To see
became
how
the
it affected.
character that they were portraying.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
because
awesome.
over 8 months they were doing it over and over and over again, and sort of when I think as an actor, when you play a part for a long time or even for a short time, there are parts of that character that you go, you know what, I kind of like that. I'll absorb that, or wow,
Right.
they're mirroring something bad in me, and now I really see that, and I'll get rid of
Right.
that. I don't
Right.
know. I think
So
actors
so
need
is
to
that your
rely on.
normal amount of time that you go to prepare, talent, like the rehearsal 8 months, or it just varies
Yeah.
on what you're working on?
No, no, that was very strange. No, we like so that one took me a year to just find the kids. I had the script for
Okay.
about a year.
Right.
Um,
A script that you wrote. This is your script. Am I correct?
yeah, yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Hmm.
And then to fundraise, as
Right.
every filmmaker
Right.
knows, is
Right.
90% of filmmaking is fundraising, and then 10% is just making the film.
Right. So you talked about
So
earlier about having a voice
yeah.
and building to the point where you felt you had that. So the voice, is that something from your prior life, like your certain experiences that you had in your life that you're trying to
Yeah.
resonate through your film, or
Yeah, and I'll be just transparent with you. I think that's the
okay.
best thing that you can do on these types of things. I tend to resonate with films like about jealousy, about revenge, about sort of darker sides of love or something like that, because I've gone through a lot of that.
Awesome.
And that's whether it's pretty or not, I'm not really here to make films to be pretty. It's
Right.
more, I'm more interested in how those thematic elements, those emotions, those power plays play out
Well, they
through
say you're
different
usually
periods.
looking for stories that have tension and a lot of conflict,
Yeah,
but you're bringing in
yeah, and there's
something
certainly
true
tension in
from experience
that.
that's
Yeah.
already there.
Yeah, and and those are really, I resonate with them,
Right.
and it would take a therapist being on the podcast with us to tell you maybe exactly why
Right.
I
Right. Right.
resonate so much with them. But, certainly because I've gone through a lot in my life,
Right.
and it's they tell you to write about the things you know about, because those are the things that you really are usually most passionate about.
Correct. Right.
And but it's also a mixture of two things. It's a mixture of writing about the things you know about. So like, there's a lot of like nature stuff I know about. There's a lot of sort of one-on-one human interactions that I know about. And then it's like, okay, so I know about that, but then what are the thematic things that I'm interested in? Like,
Right.
I don't need to know a lot about jealousy. I don't need to know a lot about, but I need to be very passionate about that. I need these things to come naturally to me. And so
Right.
some people like Scorsese, right? He might be very interested. He knows about maybe sort of the mafia life, but that's not really what his movies are about, right? They
Right.
are, but they're not. They're
Right.
more about power struggles. They're about secrets. They're about how, people keep secrets or they don't. It's about how they use certain power moves in order to gain other things in life.
Right.
Um, and it's also about love and, these other sort of overarching elements. I think as someone like, if I had to go into sort of a real third universal look at like Spielberg and Scorsese and Tarantino and some of these others, I would say that, they all write about different things,
Right.
right? But the scenarios are different, but the themes are the same. They're still talking, there are these overarching themes that seem to play well with like longevity of filmmakers, right?
Right.
Love, revenge, some of these themes that are, three or four of those are in all of their movies,
Right. Right.
that you can overlay Spielberg with Scorsese, with Tarantino, with whoever else, because they all sort of use these thematic things.
Can we
So
touch
that's sort of
upon
my view on it. I know everyone has
right?
different views, but that's my view on
No,
it.
I think that's awesome, and thank you so much for sharing. Um, can we touch really quick about maybe how does that cross over from having your own voice, working on your documentary and narrative? How does that cross over to something like commercials and music videos, where commercials you're more trying to communicate the message of the product or the customer, and it's the same thing
Yeah,
for the music video where you're relaying the message of the artist. Do you feel, you still having your voice in there, or is that something that comes
yeah.
more with style? How would you?
100% you still have your voice in there, and you have to find the cracks of your way into that.
Okay.
There was a hotel recently that I did a series of commercials for, and they really kind of wanted to sell their hotel, and so they asked me to come to them with some different ideas. And one of the themes that I'm really fascinated by is kind of nostalgia, that emotion, right? How do we feel nostalgic? What triggers nostalgia in us? What is it about nostalgia that makes it a very strong emotion? You see people that will step into their high school after 20 years and they'll start crying.
Right.
There are these memories that come back. Nostalgia is
Right.
a very, very hardcore emotion for a
Yeah.
lot of
Very
people.
powerful emotion. Yeah.
Maybe
Hmm.
not as powerful as love or whatever, but it's up there. And
Right.
so nostalgia was sort of my base point for like, okay, let's go after the people that have already stayed at this hotel and let's ask them what they loved about this. And they would start talking and crying, and God, they met their wife or their husband there, or that's where they had their first kiss, or God
Right.
knows what else happened. And we started to
Right.
develop these into stories that then became commercials. So we took
Right.
one person's story and said, okay, this guy really liked the restaurant because he had his first date there, and how we're going to turn that into a commercial. We basically took his words and turned that into script. And that's how your voice, those thematic elements that you're interested in, become a commercial.
That is awesome.
Or if they give you a script, if they say, hey, we want to sell this hotel and we want two people on vacation, well, then you got to find the cracks in that story and be like, okay, where can I fit in my emotional response as well? Because otherwise you're just going to make something cliche. And
Right.
that's
Right.
where 90% of commercials lay.
Awesome. So it comes down to integrity. It's something that you can truly say that you've experienced and you're truly voicing, and if you're not tapping into that, then everything else is being faked, and it
Yeah,
just
and
shows.
fearless filmmakers are really just people who tell their truth, not
Right.
the truth
Right.
necessarily, but
Right.
their truth. I
Because it
mean,
comes down to
you know,
perspective.
I
Right.
yeah, I made this story. I had a girlfriend who I thought had cheated on me at one point, and I made this short film called The Cannonball Tree. It's on YouTube. You can look up The Cannonball Tree.
Okay.
And I started out as a very kind of fu type video about her, and it was very emotional. And then when I sort of finished editing it, it was hilarious.
Oh wow.
It was funny, and it went on to play all these comedy fests. And it was
Yeah.
because
Something
I
you
think the
totally did not
truth,
expect. Right.
yeah, but I think the truthful of it, and I
Yeah.
actually won a fearless filmmaker award at one of the things because that was the script was authentic or something, and it was just like that's just how I felt, and it's embarrassing because you don't want to say to someone, oh, I think my girlfriend cheated on me, or
Right.
I don't want to ever look, it's like the opposite of the machismo in the filmmaking world. You don't
Right.
ever want to show that like maybe you're insecure, but
Yeah.
that's where the gold is, and it's taken me 20 years to find that out.
That
I
is
mean,
awesome.
it's taken me a long time to really like get what my voice is.
I feel like whenever you take your thoughts and you write it down on a piece of paper, and then you take the time to read it, and then sometimes
Right.
you revise it, you tend to find that that's a discovery process of yourself because you're constantly learning. And do you feel that that's the same way with film, that you're expressing these emotions, and then it takes you on this ride that, like you said, it kind of came out of anger and it ended up being comedy. Is it a self-discovery
Right.
process for you? Like when we're studying emotions and psychology, could it be a reflection of a journey that allows you to learn more and more about yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think it takes different forms, though. I've sort of found that
Okay.
filmmaking is sort of 4 or 5 different lives that you live. You live the
Wow.
idea, live the sort of generational process of like creating this, understanding it. Words come to you at some points, visuals come to you at some point. You kind of
Right.
marinate,
Right.
and it's like, oh, I've got an idea. That's
Yeah.
kind of one life of it. The second is the creation of it. So the writing of the script, the getting your crew together, the casting. This is a whole different life of the film process. Then
Right.
there's the shooting. Then the shooting is a whole different process here. That's a whole different life. It's the shoot days. It's showing up to set, being
Is
exhausted,
there is
working with
there a process that
actors.
you enjoy the most, or do you love it all?
Well, I mean, I think, and then, you have the shooting, you then have the editing, which is
Yes.
a whole
Yes.
nother process of it's a whole nother life of it. And
Yes.
then after that, you have the whole like film festival, selling the
Yeah.
post life of the film, the YouTube, the Q&As. So, I mean,
So
you
much
really
to
have
know for it to be
five,
successful.
yeah, I mean, you have 5 lives. That's why
Yeah, I see what you're
they
saying.
also
Right.
tell you make a film about something you love because you're going to be living with it for a long time. It's like
Mm,
being married. You make even a short film,
good
you're
point.
going to pump some money into that thing, and you're going to be
Right.
living with that thing for a while.
Right.
Um, and so, it's those you have to, you have to be a marathon runner if you're a
Right.
filmmaker. You can't be a sprinter because this stuff takes a lot of patience. It takes knowing that we all want to make a film right now, but you got to
Right.
know, like the little fireman, I thought I was going to make that in 6 months. It ended up being a 7-year process
Right.
uh, between the time that I had the idea and like our last screening of it.
Right.
It's
And then
been
there are
seven
things
years.
that are out of your control that may just play a factor, like let's say COVID, for example. We
Yeah.
got 10 minutes, so I'm gonna like make it quick on this, and
Okay.
then I'm just gonna
Yeah.
wrap it up.
Sorry.
No, it's my
Talking
it's
too
my
much.
fault. But and there's nothing to be sorry about because what you're sharing is amazing. So thank you for giving that. Um, did like because I seen back into 2016, you're already in film festivals, and then then after that later on comes COVID. Did that affect you? Did that make you focus more on one process like writing, or did you still, or you editing? Like, how did that affect
Yeah.
your whole
I
journey?
got to be honest with you, COVID kind of shut down everything for me.
Okay,
But the writing,
gotcha.
I wanted to think that I would maybe write more during COVID.
Right,
But COVID was a weird thing because as now we see it, oh, it's this 2 year thing. But as COVID went along, I don't, it's we have short term memory. But back then, I remember when COVID first started, and they were like, "Oh, this is going to be a 2 month thing. Don't worry, stay in your house, and 2 months later it'll be over." And
right,
then it was like 6 months, and then it was like a year, and then it was like we had different versions of it. And so
right.
it was never. I always thought, "Oh, well, this might be over soon, and we might get back to it." And in that process, it kind of shut down. I started to make more kind of narration based short films, like the Cannonball Tree.
Okay.
That's these shots that I made during coronavirus because
Oh,
I kind of had a script that was just a narration. It was like my mind
right,
running off. Basically, the movie is about a tree
right.
and this girl cheating on me and how they connect.
Right, right.
And it was a weird script. It's very black humor. I don't suggest it for people that don't
Gotcha,
like that sort of thing. But that was kind of like one of the few things I made, but it turned to more narration.
gotcha,
Um, and then it also, like, I just took up a lot of editing projects, so I was editing a lot more.
gotcha. So, like you
Yeah.
said, there's so many things going on in your life that have happened that I wouldn't even be able to touch upon. There's some other questions, and yeah, like there you have so much experience,
Yeah, I'm
and
also one of those
just
filmmakers that it has to, like, lightning has to hit me a little bit. I'm not. I wish I was more methodical in my work, but like I've gone a couple years where I didn't make anything, or
right,
like nothing. I mean,
right,
maybe I would do commercials or video projects, but there was really nothing happening, no writing, no nothing. And
right,
and I'm definitely one of those people that, like, I've got to get inspired by something that's got to talk to me and be like, that's a visual story. Because there's all sorts of types of stories, you can write, you can take photographs, you can be a storyteller, like
right.
Mitch and I are every
Yeah.
Wednesday, True
Oh,
Story
really? Right,
Miami.
right,
We tell stories on the mic, and it's a very
right.
different art form. Then it's not stand up, it's not open mic. You come with sort of a 5 minute prepared story,
So
and you
you
got to have
don't
a
do another
beginning, middle, and
project
an end.
just for the sake of doing another project. You have to be driven.
Yeah,
You have to really believe in
yeah.
it.
No, I got to be hit by lightning. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha, gotcha. Awesome. So just to wrap it up, where are you now? Like, what are your plans in the future from?
So currently, I'm working as a creative director for the Hard Rock
Okay.
Hotel Casino, the Dare nightclub, and doing a lot of graphic design and video promo stuff. Um, that I definitely get my creative kick every week, except it's under the clock this time.
Right.
But in terms of filmmaking, there are several documentaries that I'm working on. There's
Awesome.
one that I did this long podcast about, that I think we spoke outside of this podcast about.
Yes.
That is a sort of about a 70s drug smuggler named Bum Farto.
Okay.
That's his real name. That went missing in the 70s, and for 45 years, nobody knew what happened about him. And
Right.
it took myself and another author to find out the truth, and it's a lot more fascinating than anything anyone ever knew.
Gotcha. So for the viewers who want to know more about you, where can they go to find out more about you? I know you're on IMDb,
Yeah,
Instagram. Do you have your own website as
yeah.
well?
Instagram is probably the best. I'm Quincy Perkins official on Instagram. Um, I don't know. I've got a YouTube channel, Director Quincy Perkins. That's got a lot of stuff on it. Um, yeah, I've given up on Vimeo because they're just the worst.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Right.
and That's really it. I'd say YouTube and Instagram.
Okay.
I'm now
Awesome.
42, so I'm not as hip as the young kids.
Right. Right. Right.
Staying all over the place. I don't have a website or anything like that. But of course, I have Love and Youth is available screening online, and then The Little
Nice.
Firemen. You
Mm.
can type in Little Firemen or Los Bomberos, which means the firemen in Spanish. Uh, by
So
Quincy
are you
Perkins.
Hispanic?
That's on
Are,
Amazon right now. You can rent that or buy that on Amazon.
Quincy, are you Hispanic? I know you said you took linguistics. So are you like naturally Hispanic, or is it just a language that you also learned?
No, it was just I grew up in Key West, Florida. So we were,
Okay.
90 miles from Cuba. We're, as they say down there, we're closer to Cuba than the nearest Walmart.
All right.
So, Spanish was like every day
Second
in our
language.
lives down there. And
Gotcha.
it just came naturally to me as a kid. And I loved Spanish as a language. I think is absolutely fascinating how it's constructed. And so, you talked at the very beginning of this podcast about filmmaking being a language. and understanding the grammar of it and the vocabulary of it and the,
The
you
culture.
know, conjugations of it and whatever it is, the
Right.
structure of filmmaking. And I can tell you this, as a linguistics major, my God, I feel like I have such a step up on people in filmmaking, because that's sort of my angle on it. And understanding languages has really helped me understand how to tell a story in the language of film and cinema.
Awesome. So our time is up. Any final words before we wrap it up? Anything you would like to tell our viewers?
You know, I just genuinely tell people, my word of advice to young filmmakers is take that most darkest secret, embarrassing moment of your life and make a film about it, because that'll
Wow.
start you down the road of finding out what your voice is. And just know that it's not going to come easily. You're going to have to dig even deeper after that first film for the second one. And then the third is even deeper. So keep going.
Awesome advice. Thank you so much, Quincy Perkins. All right.
Yeah. Thank
So
you too. I appreciate it.
thank you for being here. Take care.
I really appreciate it. Take care.
All right.
Thank you.